So this is Chris Poulton from Martin & Co Sunderland. Thanks very much for joining me today.
No
problem. Chris, you've been one of our first ever subscribers to Dataloft Inform about 5 years ago. In fact, we chatted before we'd even launched the product.
Yeah.
At a property franchise group conference.
That's right.
And yeah, so I'm really keen to catch up with you again after all this time, and to kind of get a feel for you of why you talked about the fact that even Sunderland as a city has so many micro markets in it.
Yeah.
And you can't even talk outside of Sunderland, never mind the UK, really, to get a proper feel for what's going on. So,
yeah.
So you obviously believe in getting really hyper local with your data and kind of sharing that knowledge of the market with people. So, yeah, tell us a bit about your kind of thought process.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to Mr. Watkins here. When we opened up Martin & Co 7.5 years ago. My background was not property at all, although we had bought and sold property. I came from a kind of a banking and kind of background, marketing analysis, so on and so forth, project development. So when we first opened up, one of the very first meetings that we had with Chris Watkins, he was doing some work with the property franchise group at the time, and he said something that really kind of stood out to me, and it's kind of stuck with me all the way. He said, people really don't care about averages. People really don't care about statistics. They just care about what's important to them. That's why I've got this kind of this thing above me here. And that's kind of been my mantra all the way along. Is you speak to the average Joe on the street and they don't care whether property prices are up 0.7% or 1.9%, because that delivers absolutely no context to them whatsoever.
Yeah.
Simply by transferring that percentage into a number suddenly gets them excited. My house has gone up 7.9% in 10 years. And what does that mean? £27,341 extra in your bank. How does that? Now that's when they start getting excited. And that's when they start getting interested, because that's money in their pocket. And that's kind of how I've seen Dataloft from day one. For me,
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're obviously great mates with Chris as well. He's a great guy, and he's very much of that opinion that actually, as an agent, how do you market yourself as an agent? Well, a lot of agents do is they talk about themselves and their and how amazing they are and how many awards they've won, and that's all important. But what Chris is very good at, and what we've kind of our mantra as well is, well, how about you tell them what they really want to hear, which is how's their property going, what's going on with the market, and be relevant and useful to them, and that's what you've really kind of seized upon, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't need to tell people how brilliant I am. It's something just kidding.
Well, you don't need to, because you get the job done.
They don't care. The reality is they don't care. You can have the nicest looking board on the planet. You could have 10 sold boards up. The property, people choosing an agent doesn't make any sense sometimes. You have 10 sold boards up in the street, and then you'll see somebody going on with another agent, and you're like, why did they choose that other agent when they walk past 10 boards every day? People don't know who agents are. That's the reality. 90% of the time, people move so infrequently, they don't have a clue who the biggest agents are. The only people who know that are the people who are in the industry day in, day out. They're the only people who are really bothered about market share. They're bothered about credibility, reliability, knowledge, and kind of, the person, the trust of that person. So averages are great for a few things. Averages are great to kind of get awareness, So we'll send out kind of the Dataloft reports whenever somebody asks us for evaluation. It gives us a bit of credibility. It instantly highlights that we know more than they do. Anybody could automate a system to just instantly send out a Dataloft Inform report, and it'll look great. But what I've tried to do is use it to build a picture and build a story. Data for me needs context, and one thing in isolation tells them what you want them to know, but it doesn't tell the entire picture. So I'll give an example. You look at an investor who's looking to flip a property. and they look at the average price. So let's say the average price in Sunderland at the minute, I think it's about £113,000. The thing with averages is something's always below and something's always above. That's how you get, that's a fundamental principle of an average. Something is going to be less and something's going to be more.
Yeah.
And nobody, or very rarely, do people buy the average property. Homeowners buy the expensive ones, investors buy the cheap ones and do them up. So people are really not that interested in the average. So for me, looking at that, I'm like, where's the range? Where's the range? And that's where your kind of data really gets me into. What's the most that anyone's paid for a property? And if you can identify an area where the average property is 80 grand, but the top end property's 140 and the bottom end property's 37 or 67 or whatever it might be, you can start to paint a picture for a homeowner to say, if you're paying 120, then you're getting the best property in the street. Or you can equally say to an investor, on average, they sell for 80, but actually that's not the stat that you want. What you want to know is that the upside of your potential is 120, and you can get them for as cheap as 57, so you can add value. So for me, it's about taking that initial level of data that builds the awareness and using it to create consideration.
Because what you do, you demonstrate your knowledge of the market and you back it up with stats, and that's, that goes a long way. And
it's not for me. I've been having conversations with people for 5 years and they've never bought from me, but then bang, all of a sudden they'll buy something, or they'll get a development of 10 city centre apartments or something, and that's coming my way because over the 5 years I've been the person that they're coming to. So you've got to invest your time, and it's about not being in it for yourself. If you can help somebody make or save money, they are going to be your best friend. Not tell them stats. If you can tell them, how much of a premium can I get for new builds in SR3? And you can turn around and say, well, actually, the average resale sells for 87, but the new builds are going for 147. Again, that's where the average is destructive to a certain extent, because generally new builds are more expensive than resales, but there's not as many of them. So they would look at the overall and say, well, there's not much potential in there because the houses are too cheap. If I can split that off and kind of go at a more granular level, I'm adding value to them. If I can then say, are you looking for top 25 percentile, and again, break it down further, then fantastic. It's about not being in it for yourself. If you can help somebody make or save money, they are going to be your best friend. Not tell them stats. If you can tell them, how much of a premium can I get for new builds in SR3? And you can turn around and say, well, actually, the average resale sells for 87, but the new builds are going for 147. Again, that's where the average is destructive to a certain extent, because generally new builds are more expensive than resales, but there's not as many of them. So they would look at the overall and say, well, there's not much potential in there because the houses are too cheap. If I can split that off and kind of go at a more granular level, I'm adding value to them. If I can then say, are you looking for top 25 percentile, and again, break it down further, then fantastic. If I can take variables out like house size and say, well, actually, let's cut to the chase. When you do a new build, it's about price per square foot. When you're doing conversions, it's about price per square foot. Let's take out, why did that one sell for 90 and that one sell for 110 when they're both on the same street? Well, actually, it's because it's 110 square feet bigger. Let's take that variable out and let me tell you what the average and top and bottom price per square foot is, which you can do in Dataloft Inform. That's when you give them information that they can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, so you become the kind of go-to person, and you're winning business by...
They've got no choice. They've got no choice, because where else can, if I didn't have Dataloft Inform, where else can I get that information from? They can't, and they're living down south, and if I can't, so for me, they have no, it's forcing them to come back to you almost, because if they need that information to make money, then they've got to come to you.
It's a fascinating sort of change in the marketing world, where, I mean, basically what you're saying is you're winning more business by almost selling less. You're informing and sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever sold. I don't like selling in that sense. Maybe it's called it old-fashioned, but I think there's so many people out there who will just spin it and spin it and spin it. When was the last time an agent turned around and said, based on the conversation we've had, that's my property that you've inquired on isn't the right property for you? In fact, nothing I've got on my books is the right property for you. However, I've seen 3 or 4 properties down the road with another agent that may be great for you. This is the stats. This is the details. I'm a letting specialist. I'm doing you a favor here. I'm not saying that to them, but I'm basically saying I'm saving you some money here. I'm saving you a potential mistake of a buy. It's about creating a place in the market where you're building trust.
That's incredible, yeah. And the point is that they will remember that more than they'll remember any other interaction with an agent. And people are staying in their homes for so long. They've got friends who are moving. They've got family, and you become that kind of recommendation because of that attitude.
If someone's looking at property, especially if we're talking about a property investor or something like that, they're speaking to 10, 15, 20, maybe 50 agents in a year. They will become vanilla. Only an arrogant agent thinks that they're going to stand out just because they're amazing. So you've got to do something that makes them think that's the person I'm going to go back to.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get a landlord lead. It's really hard to get a sales lead. That's where the bun fight is right now. There's 40% less properties on the market in Sunderland than there was this time last year.
But huge demand.
But 30% up in demand and 10% up in sales agreed. So as an agent, the challenge isn't to be able to sell the property. The challenge is to be able to list the property. So you've got to have this stream of people that want to come to you. And you've got to build that somehow. You've got to be the one that they go, you know what, I'll go to him because he was the one that helped me out. He was the only one that said something different.
Yeah.
Or did something different. And Dataloft from day one has helped us do that. I've got to add more detail. I've got to add more depth. I've got to add more insight. I've got to do it in a more meaningful way.
Well, I mean, so you take what we've got and you're creative with it. I mean, the ultimate example is sitting on top of your head. Well, it looks like it's sitting on top of your head, but it's behind you. So you've basically gone back 21 years in the data and pulled out a stat from Inform. And presumably that's sitting. I mean, how would you use that with Inform? Would you put that on social media? Because for example, or what would you do with it? Because that is just fascinating to read, and it makes people think, "Ooh, maybe I should think about putting my house on the market."
Let's imagine let's imagine you're sitting in your house. You get 2 mail shots. Or you get 3 mail shots. You get your mail shot from agent number 1, invitation, comes through, generic, bland, basic. You get your next ones in. We need more properties.
Yeah.
And what the hell's that got to do with me? And then you get one through saying £68,000. Now, the reality is most people aren't selling at that time. But if you've been in your house 20 years, 15 years, 30 years, which one's more likely to stick out for you?
Well, it's fascinating because actually the average time for people staying in their homes now is 18 years, believe it or not. So you're looking at 21 years there, 20 years of data. So you're pretty much tying in with how long a lot of people you have been on the market.
The other reason I went back so far, one, because it's a blooming big number, you know what I mean? And bearing in mind, 68 grand in Sunderland, we're talking about the average house price in Sunderland right now of 113,000. So to put it in context, wow. 68,000 is a huge number.
That's incredible.
And somebody who's bought or sold in the last 2 or 3 years, as well as probably not seeing that much growth, has probably got relationships already with other agents. If somebody hasn't moved in 20 years, they probably couldn't list an agent in the area. So you're in with a shout anyway, whether you're the smallest agent or the largest agent, that's not a consideration. So the further you go back from that point of view, not only are you hitting those people who haven't moved in a long time, but you're competing on a level playing field, even if you're the smallest agent or the newest agent on the street.
Yeah.
So using them in mail shots is big. The other thing, and I'll flip one up for you now. I'm just going to change it. If I give me 2 seconds, Rory. I'm just going to change it to another one. I'll see if it's still in there. Yeah,
no worries.
There we go.
Oh yes, I love this one. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was one that I put up on LinkedIn. I'd had so many conversations about everybody's thinking that Sunderland is so cheap that every house in Sunderland sells for under 40 grand. And to be honest, it started doing my
What about the footballers have to live somewhere?
Oh, you know what I mean? And it's just like, come on, not every. So when I did the analysis, there was something like 28, 29 out of 2,000 sales went for under 40 grand. So almost nothing does, but everybody wants to beat that kind of stamp duty. So I put this out, and again, off Dataloft Inform, what's the most expensive house ever to sell in Sunderland in that year? 690 grand. It played both ends of the market. It played to the market of people who lived in the 700 grand houses, but it also played on that 40 grander. By putting in their mind, this guy's got a list of people who are looking for 40 grand properties, and lo and behold, I got a phone call
It's
from
building
someone.
your brand and building your. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
I got a phone call from somebody saying, "I've got an apartment in the 40 to 45 grand range. Do you reckon you could sell it for me? Because it sounds like you've got a list of people." And that was literally within 24 hours. Now, I'm not saying that happens all of the time.
Yeah.
But it was something different, and it was something that was local and relevant and interesting to people, rather than a big circle graph saying we've sold more houses than everybody else. It's probably because you listed more houses than everybody else. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. I mean that was the whole Savills mantra all those years ago when they set up a market research, a market intelligence team. They were going to build their whole brand by showing that they knew the market inside out.
You look at that though, and Savills is a great example. Savills, Knight Frank, and stuff like that. Obviously, competitors to you guys in certain elements of your business, competitors to us. But there's a reason that Savills and Knight Frank can charge the fees that I wouldn't get away with when selling a property, because they've established that credibility that makes people want to go to them. It's the Apple. It's the reason that people go to Apple and spend £1,000 on an iPhone rather than 100 quid on a budget one. It's the reason that people go to Waitrose and Marks and Spencer rather than farm foods and kind of heron foods that we have up north and stuff like that, because people perceive a value.
Never heard of that.
The other advantage is the more that you can be seen as an expert, the more that you can position yourself as something different and therefore justify the fees that we should be getting, because the fees in a state agency are ridiculously low, stupidly low.
Yeah, and actually the evidence, because we looked at the Home Moving Trends survey by Property Academy last year, we analysed it, and the evidence is that it's a much smaller amount of people that are bothered by fees than you'd think, and yet fees continue to go downwards. So it doesn't add up. There's complete imbalance.
Agents go, let's all be honest, and I've never been anything but honest. Agents go in, they know there's 3 agents in there. The first 2 questions that the agents try to get out of the seller is, who else have you had in here? What did they value it at, and what was the fee? If the property's already overvalued, then the only thing that we negotiate on is fee. So that's where we get to, and it eats into everybody. For me, it's just like, look, your fee is your fee. If you're not happy with my fee, fair enough.
Yeah, stick to your guns. Absolutely.
Fair enough. I know what I'm worth. If you don't see that, it's up to me to prove my value. And I think, this is something that Dataloft Inform is something that enables me to prove my value. Because if I can save somebody 20 grand, then surely an extra 500 quid in my pocket is worth it in their mind.
Absolutely. And you'll sell it for the price that you put it on the market.
Because it's the
rather
right
than
price.
Having to switch to another agent further down the line.
It'll sell for a better price, it'll sell quicker, and we'll all be happy at the end of the day. So.
Oh, brilliant.